Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, I'm continuing my series on what's in a radionic machine. Well, again, as I've stated, hardly any research has went into of what makes these machines tick. What really makes them work? And basically, everybody's given up on that entire fact because there really hasn't been any research of flowing of these energies. Now, these are particular type of energetic informational fields. They tend to be consciousness based, which means measuring them with known meters of today is difficult, but certainly not impossible. And there certainly are meters that can assist in this entire process. But it really doesn't matter. What matters is the results. Now, the book Healing with Radionics goes into, which was written in the 80s, goes into numerous cases of healing people using all sorts of different types of machines, which is quite fascinating. I believe they even use some odd configurations. I'm trying to remember what they were, but something that wasn't really even a machine, and kind of channeling the energies through them. But there wasn't any particular type of machine used, and there's been many different types, particularly coming out of England, that have made different types of machines. So since this has never really been worked on and never really discussed to any great level, and certainly not something that has been tried to be amplified further, it leaves everybody in a strange position. Now, it has been come from many people, including the famous author of Radionics, Tansley, who died of cancer, that the machines were all secondary. It had nothing to do with it. That they were nothing more than psychic tuning crutches. Now, I do agree with this to a large degree, but that is because of the primality, how primitive this technology is, because nobody has worked on it to make it better. Of course, that's not entirely true. The machines that came out in the 50s and 60s and 70s, made by Delaware and Bruce Copen, have endless amounts of dials on them, insinuating that they're so much more powerful because of that. So they certainly weren't made simplistically on the outside where you interacted with the machinery. The problem is the internal guts, as I talked about with Copen machines before, is just junk. It's just a bunch of surplus circuit boards. They really don't do anything. And even if there's electricity going through them to some extent, electricity for what? I mean, circuit boards are notoriously poison-based with lead, seleniums. There's a whole bunch of toxic metals in there that certainly aren't going to help you. So in having a lot of dials and so forth, well, this seemed to be the way that a lot of people were going. And there are machines that have endless amounts of dials. As a matter of fact, there are humongous machines you see in pictures that had hundreds of dials on them. And people were dialing these in what fashion? It's been lost now of exactly how a lot of these actually work. I mean, it's quite shocking at the peak of radionics. They look like, I don't know if anybody's seen a stand-up kind of piano, like a player piano, which you have the keys in front of you, but then it goes about 2 or 3 feet above you sitting down or in front of you. Well, I mean, that would be a small machine. There are humongous size machines out there. Ruth Drowned, one of the major practitioners, had rooms filled with these machines because you were unable really to treat multi-people on one machine. You have to use an individual machine for each person you treat or work on. And of course, this is still the same thing today. You can't treat multi-people with the same machine unless you're sending them the same types of energies. So if you want to send everybody financial prosperity, well, you could come up with that particular energetic field and send it to many different people. But that's still not really good radionics, because everybody would have their own individual rate for that particular energy field. You can use general rates, but I don't want to get too caught up in that. But in general, you have to use one machine for one person. So you can imagine if you're a doctor treating people, that you would need 50, 60 machines. And of course, this is exactly what happened in most practitioners. Now, I don't know exactly with these bigger machines, maybe they were so big and had so many dials because they were designed to treat multi-people with. So that is interesting. So, none of this, as I said, and disappointingly, has anybody really ever talked about. They talk about radionics, they talk about so many different things and the theories behind it, but who cares about all that? This is a technology that works. It's been done long enough to verify that. What is making it work? What is it? Now, in the recent studies done after 30 years of research by a William Bankston, who's done hands-on absentee healing, which is to a certain extent very similar to radionics without the machines. So he's been able to send healing energy into certain items that were top healers. People who had great healing energies would send energy into either water or, of all strange things, pure cotton gauze. What? Yeah. So the whole idea is that these then held this kind of healer's energies and could be passed to sick people to then hold these and get benefits from it. Here we go again. He also did remote healing of live species. He worked on rats and mice to heal them and did this for many, many years and trying to figure out, well, what is this mysterious process? What's going on? How can we do this? But the bottom line is that there really was no apparatus used. He got people that had no involvement at all, just to kind of stand over things, just kind of be in the process of healing, and was getting results from it. Well, I think a lot of this is confusing to the fact to most people, and of course to him, because he doesn't quite understand how these energetic informational fields work. But the point is that he wasn't using machines. He was getting amazing results, as he is today with the people that he trains. He has a hands-on healing method, which seems to work better when you're physically there and you touch someone. You get better results than doing it at a distance, but you still get results both way. What? So, very interesting. And he's done this for 30 years, has classes and everything. So I highly recommend everybody to check out. He has a book called The Energy Cure. Everyone should get this. He also has a DVD little course of how to do his system, which is very good. I think there's 6 DVDs there. He goes over his system, talks about it. I always love stuff that's done in audio, as well as following up with the book. So these are highly recommended, and we'll probably have links under this audio so that you can actually get those. Highly recommend. This is a system that's been proven for 30 years by a scientific researcher, a person who is not a doctor but is a statistical guy, and just got into this and just been following it. He just looks at the statistics. He's not bought into it one way or another. And it's irrefutable what he's come up with, and someone to definitely follow. Something is happening here, and health is always number one. So what's in these machines that do it? So what I'm trying to say is that here we go based on, now what makes Bankston systems work? Well, basically it's psychic intention and focusing to a degree. So it's focusing and then disconnecting, because you can't make something happen. You get the energy going there. But that's another discussion. So what's in these machines? Let's get back to it. So nobody has spent any time doing this. There's very little discussions about it. What are people putting in there that... now, the traditional machines, particularly Ruth Drown, used a 1 meg potentiometer. Now, a potentiometer is what all dials are connected to in this day and age. It's pretty much exclusively used. There are some variable capacitors out there as well that some people use. Now, capacitors is a type of potentiometer. I don't want to get into all of it, but this is what dials are connected to. Almost entirely, they're using potentiometers and not variable capacitors. Now, old variable capacitors used by Hieronymus and by Kelly machines generally tend to be very big. They can be 3 inches long easily and very large. So you have to put them in a special type of cabinet if you're going to use that to tune it. Now, potentiometers are pretty small. They're at the most, they're about 3/4 of an inch thick, and you can put those just about anywhere. So anytime you see a dial that has numbers on it, or even if it's digital numbers, generally it's going, you're turning a potentiometer that is connected to that dial. So they have that, and that's in every basic unit out there. Then they have wires going from one dial to another in a series. So, and it goes in a particular pattern. It doesn't jump around. It goes. So if you have a 9-dial unit, you'll go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and it goes that way. And that's the way it goes. Now, it has, and it generally has a wire. These wires are nothing special. They're just standard electrical wires. Some people put things in between there. I'm not sure. I've seen resistors. I said there's many variants, but I don't want to necessarily get into that. Now, the older machines even had grounding wires. You ground the machine and yourself to like a water pipe or plumbing or whatever, and you would be grounded to it, and this is going to help the process. Now, I used to make machines like that as well. People have given that up mostly because it's more of a pain. I don't know if that's good or bad. So you have that. And what do you have? You have 2 plates. I call it the in plate and the out plate. So the in plate goes to the first plate, usually on the upper left, goes to dial 1. And then the last one, the out plate, which is in the upper right, usually is connected to the last dial. So if there's 9 dials, 9 would then flow into that plate. And that's pretty much it. Some people complete the circuit, meaning that it is a closed circuit, but generally you're going out to some sort of, there are variances to going out to antennas or not, or completing the circuit, etc. So all of these is a particular problem depending on what you're doing with the basic design. And as I've mentioned before, if you look up online these schematics for a crystal radio, it's almost identical. And of course, crystal radios, where you tune into actual frequencies, radio signals in particular, you can actually, and they're non-powered, you can actually listen to the actual radio station that you using a crystal. You can tune into it and actually listen to with an earphone. You can't get any kind of volume, so you use an earbud, so to speak, and you can tune into the radio stations in your area just by tuning this dial. That's very, very similar, and it's kind of a similar process, except you're not tuning into radio signals. You're tuning into what are these higher level radionic or consciousness energies. But the process is very similar. Now, to tune in to get these radio signals through a large wire, usually a bound copper wire, I don't know how, usually wound on a fairly large little holder, many hundreds of times. You have this, and you're tuning through that to pick this up. But basically, it's kind of a variation of this when you're doing your dialing stuff. So you're doing the dialing, and you always dial 1 through 9 as well. You're dialing into the actual energies that you are trying to determine from whatever you place on the in plate, or whatever you want to send to somebody. So the energy flows in from there, goes through the dials, and I don't want to get too much into how it's exactly done. We'll get into that in other audios here as well, but the bottom line is that's what's inside of these things. Is there anything else? Well, most things that are added are amplifiers of some sort. Now, it's thought to that you would use, because of the resonance of it, that you use audio amplifiers. Now, audio amplifiers generally tend to amplify radionic consciousness signals better than other types of amplifiers. And as we discussed, the resonance that you get from tube amplifiers is critically important to get powerful units. But if there is anything in there, and a lot of them don't have anything. A lot of them don't have anything but dials and wires, and there are little to no amplification there. A lot of units today don't even plug in anymore. And of course, if they do, they could be a joke. They may not even be putting any energy through the unit, as I've mentioned with the Copen units that actually weren't empowering anything. It was just turning the light on. So we get back into this pure psychic process. And of course, this is apparently what Abrams had found out himself and developed, is that he put in just a simple dialing pattern. This pattern then he mixed in and put different parts in to make it more serious. Because if someone opens a box and they just see potentiometers and wires going to a few plates, they say, what is this? Some people don't buy into it. If it's not electric, they don't buy into it. If the light doesn't come on, they don't buy into it as a general procedure. So there has to be something happening. If they feel there's no electricity going through it, that it is not working. Now, there has been a lot of research done on electrical and non-electrical in terms of whether it works, and it does seem that the electrical units with some sort of application work dramatically better than non-electrical units. So it's important that you electrify and amplify in some fashion. Other units failed at huge levels, while the electric ones did not. So this is something that has been tested through the years and is pretty much agreed upon. Now, what else is there? And you got to think of the fact that, okay, you lay a picture on the in plate or the out plate, and this is supposed to be good enough to generate energies through the unit. Now, I disagree with that as well, but you're getting some sort of flow of vibrational energy there. But how? So, particularly with the poor pictures we have. That's why it's so important to use a very strong witness, a instant Polaroid type camera witness, so the energy is there at a strong level. I just don't believe that laying a picture on there is good enough. So these are the type of things that we have to figure out in terms of what is going on now. Now, a classical example of this, I'm going to have lots of things posted online to show how these particular machines look inside, which should fascinate everybody. One of the most famous time is the Malcolm Ray machines. Now, Malcolm Ray had all these cards. You could say these cards were like sigils. They were circles, had X's on them, and this meant that this was his reading with a pendulum, which would denote a certain energy. Now, you'd put this card in one side of the machine, very similar to that. It was basically the same exact machine, but some of it's even worse. So you had one potentiometer in the center between two, let's say, plates. You would then insert a card in the sending plate, the in plate, and on the out plate, you generally put homeopathic tablets, water, etc. And then you would just turn that dial to signify the transfer at what strength of that energy from one to the other. Now, what was in there? Nothing. Basically, some didn't even have wires to any great extent. It was just the dials going to each side. And when they did have wires, you'd have one little wire going from there, and that was it. So here again, what is happening? Now, here we're getting the vibrational energy supposedly from the particular card. That card has the energy in it, and now you're transferring the energy that the card has in it into water or a tincture or other things. Now, this fits into this kind of energetic information. How powerful it is, it's hard to take these things serious when they're so damn simple. Does this really work to transfer these subtle informational energetic fields? Well, supposedly it does. And from this point, it pretty much has been verified that it works to some level. How strong is it? If this stuff was so good, how come it didn't continue? How come there isn't more of it? It's not like you can't find this stuff out there, and the cards and everything else. They are out there. Old Ray machines are out there. I think there's someone who's making new styles of these things. But I mean, they're so simplistic. And there's zero electricity involved in this. So you're basically taking this card, which has energy in it, and just allowing that energy to flow from the card into a wire that takes it over to, and of course I'm not sure if we're dealing with electromagnetics here or not. In terms of that, you're dealing with a flow pattern. Now, it uses wires because that's the way you do it. Now, do you need to use wires? Well, maybe not. So, yeah, this is a whole consciousness process. You're molding occultons, energetic informational fields that shape matter. You're taking those, and it can be symbolized as a number, otherwise known as a rate, or on a card, or a sigil, or an image. These are all informational energetic fields that change matter to lesser or greater degrees. Now, we're not talking about physical changes, but I guess you could do that as well, as some people have done already. But we're talking about the energetic informational fields, particularly when you're talking about making homeopathics. Now, homeopathy apparently has been extremely well proven to be successful. Something I've always kind of say, gee, it's hard to put your head around that you're using just informational energetic fields, just the energy, nothing physical whatsoever in terms of what's considered physical. I do consider these energetic fields physical because they change matter. That is considered physical. And of course, we could put a meter on these things if people spend enough time to figure out how to make one that could be used and made commercial. So it is a physical matter. It's just that it is at such a low level, but that's what everybody really takes in and uses. You don't use the chemicals. If you take something, let's say a medication or whatever it may be, even supplements, you don't use the chemicals of it. It is broken down. Now, what the scientists say is you break down the chemicals and these physical items go into your blood and you're using the physical components of those things. Let's say vitamin C. Well, that's one way of looking at it. Well, that's a way of handling or putting in a case, a box, or a delivery system, you could say, to get the vibrational energy that vitamin C produces. So it's in a tablet, you take it, your body does. But in the end, what your body is taking in is not the chemicalness of it, it's the informational energetic field that says vitamin C. And this is transferred through your body, taken from the physical, turned into the energetic. Now, this is, of course, amplified by understanding with acupuncture. So the whole idea is that, does this simplistic stuff work? Well, we're trying to find this once and for all, but this is how machines are made, and that's why they're so simplistic. Are there better ones? Well, it appears that the SE5 is basically taking digital data and then putting it through a scalar antenna to send it to its target. Now, again, digital data is in great compromise of how well it works. So how well does digital data transfer into your human reality? Now, we're not talking about physical data. I'm a subtle energy physicist, and I don't deal with digital energy fields per se. We're looking into that. What I deal with is things that produce energy. Now, do digital energy fields produce enough to make change? Well, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it, and I haven't seen much come from all these computerized units. Again, everybody, it's wonderful, it works great, buy it. I don't see much proof from these people of what they've been doing over 20, 30 years, like the SE5. I don't know what that does, and there's very little stating anything because of legality problems. And, of course, you think you'd be able to do a lot more with agriculture, yet doesn't seem to be much out there. It's hard to find the information, and certainly isn't spread well through the manufacturers, who apparently is afraid to do this. Now, you got to remember there's the medical mafia, and then there's the chemical agricultural mafia. Now, everybody eats, right? So all of these chemicals, seeds, etc., all of these things have to be used by the population of the earth, meaning it's a billion-dollar business, hundreds of billions, maybe trillions. There's a huge amount of money that has to be spent on fertilizers and other things. And if you come out with something that stops the use of fertilizers, you're cutting out billions of dollars. Well, that company is pretty motivated to stomp on you. So this is the way of the world. So we just don't know. So I understand the catch-22 there, but I also understand that there isn't much to it. But the actual what appears to be with the computerized units, at least the SE5, is that it's using some sort of scalar antennas in there, which are picking up the energy and then causing these changes. Now, these are not what's in traditional radionic units. This is pretty new technology, scalar antennas. These are not something that has been around all that, excuse me, that many years. The other recent use of amplification or holding energy seems to be the use of holograms, but this is not what has generally been in machines in the past. And the great claims of success and everything else were none of this new stuff. So we don't know what works or not in this particular area because of, as I said, the legal problems, the cutthroatness of any business. And, you know, when you get into alternative industries and maybe in regular industries, I mean, it's very hard to make a buck. So people are very cutthroat. And everybody's attacking everyone else. Some of this is done by design, and there are paid infiltrators. But that's what you're talking about. You're basically talking about a wires connecting from one dial to another, and this goes to a couple of plates. That's it. Now, as I said, there has been the recent upgrades, have been some sort of amplification, whether that's solid state, and they used to use solid state audio amplifiers, and this, of course, started off, there used to be amplifiers that were used with tubes. This went to solid state after that. So that's what people are doing if there's an amplifier in it generally. Now, some people have it going to an antennas and other things. I've always been a person who likes to have physical components to it, even though we're talking about quantum physics here. Should an antenna be something that is needed? Is the transfer going through some sort of atmospheric thing? Well, I used to do this and put antennas on things because I felt that, hey, let's get the energy out there into the environment and handle both the subtle energy physics of it and the direct energy transfer physics as well. So I've always liked to do both. The other thing is making sure you're getting a strong signal into the machine so you can tune it properly. Because if you don't tune it properly, well, you're not going to get the effects. And of course, tuning is another thing. So this is where it becomes complicated. Can anybody tune these machines? Well, it's like everything in life. Can anybody learn to be psychic? I'm not sure you can. Well, I think most people can, and you could reach a certain level. Are you going to be able to tune something to higher levels? I don't know. I think anybody can become competent at this if they like it. But a lot of people have problems with all of these types of subtle things because it's so different from their own reality. You know, they're looking for these Hertzian fields. They want to tune in Hertzian energies. Well, this is generally not what you're doing. So you're not producing this level. Now, there are some machines that do, and these are quite different. Then you're just tuning in frequencies from books or other things. And, of course, there are radionic rate books as well. But when you have Rife frequencies or Hertzian frequencies, you're using an actual Hertzian frequency. That's not what radionics traditionally is. So, I mean, that's the most simplest way. Now, there are other things to it. Some people have in and out jacks where you can plug things into. I've had these as well. There's also the number of dials. Some people have as little as 1, 2, and 3 is common. 9 is another common one. 12 is common. Of course, it goes up from there. People that have 30, 40, 50 dials. What does all that mean? So, we need to look at these things to find out what is the most prominent. So each person had their own way of doing things, and each person had their own types of machines. But amplification is critical. You've got to amplify, and you got to amplify properly, which is not solid state. And of course, you need to feed the signal in strong into the unit to have it amplified and broadcast out, or to tune it in. I mean, these are the keys to radionics, which you don't see. Generally, you just see what I told you, and some people have some sort of amplification in it. But there's a great variance. Only one manufacturer that I know of is using variable capacitors, tunable capacitors, which is the Peter Kelly people, whose son is still in business. He passed away. that uses that. Most others do not. So they're using just standard potentiometers, which are cheap, etc. Again, the dials usually have 0 to 10 on them, or could have 0 to 100. And again, this makes tuning very, very difficult if you have so many dials. But these are the variants I'm talking. In terms of the guts of it, again, it's dials connected to wires going to plates. And this can be a closed circuit, meaning you then have a wire going from the out plate to the in plate as a final diagram. And one of the things is that there is what they call these paper radionic units, which do produce energy. We're getting into now the sigil range of things. An image creates an energy. Now, this does work. And if you actually use a symbolic machine rate, meaning you're using the schematic of it, when it comes to using these consciousness subtle energies, seems to work very well. And of course, the amplification is the amplification that you're giving it. So the problem with paper ones, and we do make an amulet, but the good thing about amulets is that you're pumping energy into them all the time. So paper ones, if you just let it sit there, tend not to be as good as a physical machine that is amplified. And of course, you can't beat that, but having a amulet radionic unit is quite potent. You can use it all the time. You can send energy into it all the time. It's a fantastic little energizing schematic, and we put in all sorts of things into our designs that make them very unique. Amplifying patterns. There's all sorts of things that go into our amulets other than the crude design you see on the outside. There's all sorts of stuff hidden underneath, or what you could kind of say in the box. There's all sorts of stuff in there. But again, if you use the pattern, which again looks almost identical to a crystal radio, you're able to send energy that way too. But of course, these are once you start doing things like this, when you get down to just a printed design that's on a piece of paper, you are and you're only using that one design, well, this is a low energy tool. When you use an amulet that is highly empowered, well, this is the next step up, and a radical step up. And we also use lasers and other things. But these are not meant to replace an actual physical machine of some sort that of one nature or another. So all of that has to be kept in mind so that we understand fully what type of technology this is. So until next time.